I thought I was just having a clumsy afternoon when I fell outside the grocery store, and a stranger crouched beside me and said, very quietly, "The ring you are wearing does not belong to you, and the woman who gave it to you knows exactly why." I laughed it off, the way you laugh off something that frightens you before you've had time to understand why it frightens you. I should have listened, because 48 hours later, I would discover that everything I believed about my husband's family and about the antique diamond ring I had worn on my right hand for 3 years as a symbol of their welcome was a precisely constructed lie, and that the old woman outside the store had not been guessing at all. I need to go back a little further, though, because none of this will make sense without the context of what came before, the years of warmth and dinners, and the particular practiced way that certain people make you feel chosen before they make you feel trapped. My name is Monica. At the time all of this happened, I was 31 years old, married to a man named Paul for 4 years, and living in a small but genuinely beautiful house in a suburb that smelled of cut grass in the summer and wood smoke in the fall. We had a pale blue kitchen with white tile counters and a back porch that caught the afternoon light in a way that made everything look a little more golden than it actually was. Paul worked in logistics management for a mid-sized shipping company. I was a mid-level project coordinator for an interior design firm, and I was, by any reasonable measure, content. Not ecstatic. Content. The steady, warm, dependable version of happiness that you stop noticing only when it is gone. Paul was a good man, or I thought he was. He was steady and methodical, the kind of person who remembered to change the smoke detector batteries and never missed a bill payment. He was not effusive or romantic in the Hollywood sense, but he had small, consistent habits of care that I had come to understand as love. The way he always refilled my coffee before his own. The way he kept a spare umbrella in his car because I was always losing mine. The way he said goodnight as though he meant it every single time. We disagreed sometimes, the way any two people who live in close proximity will disagree. But we were, I believed, a unit, a team. I believed that without reservation. His mother, Eleanor, was a different kind of warmth, the kind with a slight draft under the door. I want to be fair to her even now, even after everything. When I first met Eleanor, I genuinely liked her. She was a compact, elegant woman in her mid-60s, with silver hair she wore in a low chignon, and a taste for silk blouses and understated gold jewelry. She cooked extraordinary food, a beef stew that smelled like something from another century, an apple cake that Paul and I ate cold out of the pan the morning after she brought it over. She called me dear in a way that felt, at first, like genuine affection. She asked about my work with apparent interest. She sent birthday cards handwritten on thick cream paper. But there was always, underneath all of it, a faint current of something I could not name. A way she had of looking at me a half-second too long when I spoke. A particular tone, slightly too gracious, slightly too careful, that appeared whenever the subject of Paul's finances or the house or the future came up. A habit of touching things in our home as she passed them, running a finger along the mantel, adjusting a picture frame, picking up an object and setting it down elsewhere, as though she were cataloging an inventory she had partial claim to. I noticed these things and filed them under, she's just old-fashioned and it's a generational thing, and she loves him and she's adjusting. I was a champion filer in those days. The ring came into my life about 3 years before everything collapsed. It was presented at a Sunday dinner, one of the long, unhurried meals Eleanor hosted every few weeks in the formal dining room of her house, which was large and immaculately kept and always smelled of beeswax candles and the ghost of decades of good cooking. Paul's younger sister Diane was there. His uncle Robert, Eleanor's brother-in-law, elderly, hard of hearing, perpetually amused, sat at the far end of the table. It was a pleasant evening, or it had been, up until the moment Eleanor disappeared into the back hallway and returned carrying a small velvet box. She set it on the table in front of me with a kind of ceremonious deliberateness, as though she had rehearsed this moment. "This was my mother's," she said, "and her mother's before that. It has been in this family for nearly 100 years. She opened the box. Inside was a ring, a round-cut diamond set in rose gold filigree, antique and almost impossibly delicate, the kind of thing that belongs behind glass in a museum. I want you to have it, Monica, as a symbol that you are truly part of this family. I remember looking at Paul. His expression was warm, pleased, slightly emotional. Diane was smiling. Robert was nodding with his particular brand of benign, absent approval. I remember the weight of the room, all those eyes, all that family history compressed into a tiny velvet box. And I remember thinking that this was one of the most genuinely touching moments of my adult life. Eleanor, I said, I don't know what to say. Say you'll wear it, she said, and she slid it onto my right hand herself, and it fit perfectly, and everyone raised their glasses. I wore it every day after that. It became as natural on my hand as my wedding band. I thought of it as a bridge, something that connected me to a history I had married into, an act of acceptance that I had sometimes wondered if I would ever fully receive from a woman as particular and self-contained as Eleanor. I was moved by it. I was grateful. I should have wondered why it fit so perfectly. The slip happened on a Tuesday in late October. I had gone to the grocery store after work, one of those exhausted end-of-day trips where you move through the aisles on autopilot, throwing things into the cart without really seeing them. It was raining, the fine, persistent kind that makes every surface look slightly greasy, and when I stepped off the curb in the parking lot, my left foot went out from under me, and I went down fast and hard, landing on my right palm and my left knee. My cart rolled sedately away from me, the groceries I was carrying scattered across the wet asphalt. An apple rolled under someone's car. A jar of pasta sauce shattered 2 feet from my hand, red and spectacular. I sat there for a moment, wet and stunned and taking inventory of what hurt. My knee was scraped. My palm was scraped. My dignity was entirely demolished. 2 people hurried over, a young man who retrieved my cart and a middle-aged woman who helped me up, and I was murmuring thank yous and collecting my bags when I became aware of a third person crouching beside me, quite close. She was an older woman, heavily layered in clothing despite the mild temperature, with dark eyes and a wide, unreadable face. She looked at my right hand, the hand I had landed on, the hand with Eleanor's ring, with an expression I can only describe as recognition. Not surprise, recognition. The way you look at something you were expecting to see. "The ring you are wearing does not belong to you," she said. Her voice was low and even, without any particular drama. And the woman who gave it to you knows exactly why. I stared at her. "Excuse me?" But she was already standing, already moving away, pulling her layers around her with a kind of efficient privacy. She did not look back. The young man with my cart was looking at the space she had occupied with a slightly bewildered expression. "Friend of yours?" he asked. "No," I said. I drove home. I told myself it was nothing. A strange woman, a strange comment, the kind of thing that happens in parking lots when the day is wet and gray and everyone is a little unmoored. I made dinner. I poured a glass of wine. I did not tell Paul about it, partly because it seemed too minor to mention, and partly because of something I could not quite articulate, a faint, uncomfortable resonance the woman's words had set off somewhere behind my sternum, a vibration I did not want to amplify by speaking it aloud. I looked at the ring while I washed the dishes, the rose gold, the delicate filigree, the stone which caught the kitchen light and scattered it in small, cold pieces across the white tile. I had never had it appraised. It had never occurred to me to have it appraised. It was a family heirloom, not an object of commerce. Does not belong to you. I turned off the tap and dried my hands and went to watch television with my husband, and I said nothing, and that night I slept badly for reasons I could not identify with precision, waking twice in the small hours with a vague, sourceless unease that I attributed to the fall, to the wine, to the general low-grade stress of a demanding week. It was Paul's behavior over the next 48 hours that cracked it open. It started the following morning. Small things, easily dismissed individually, impossible to ignore in aggregate. He was on his phone in the bedroom when I came upstairs, and he ended the call the moment he heard me on the stairs. Not quickly, with the guilty jerk of a person hiding something specific, just quietly, naturally, the way you end a call you've finished. Except he had not finished it. I caught, in the half second before the screen went dark, the word mother in the call log. He came to breakfast pleasant and entirely normal. I told myself I was being paranoid. That evening, I mentioned the parking lot incident over dinner, not the old woman, just the fall. I described the wet asphalt, the shattered pasta sauce jar, and watched his face. He winced sympathetically. He asked if my knee was okay. He did not ask about the ring. I remember thinking quite clearly that the ring was the first thing I would have asked about had the situation been reversed. He said nothing about it. I said, casually, "The ring is fine, by the way, no damage." Something moved through his expression, very fast, very controlled, but there. A flicker of something that was not quite relief and not quite anxiety, but that lived in the neighborhood of both. He said, "Good, that thing is irreplaceable," and returned to his food. That night, after Paul fell asleep, I lay in the dark and thought about that flicker. At 11:30, I got up, went to my home office, opened my laptop, and typed into the search bar, "Antique diamond ring, rose gold, filigree, heirloom, provenance identification." This led me, through an hour of spiraling research, to a specialist forum for antique jewelry authentication. I photographed the ring from multiple angles and posted the images with a query. I did not expect a response until morning. I went back to bed. There was a response waiting for me at 6:15 when I woke up, from a user whose profile identified them as a certified gemologist with 30 years of experience in estate jewelry. Happy to help with identification. The filigree pattern and setting style suggests this piece dates to approximately 1935 to 1945, consistent with Art Deco late period. The stone looks like a very good quality round-cut diamond, approximately 0.8 to 1.0 carat based on photo. However, and I want to be careful here because photos can be misleading, there is something about the proportions of the filigree work that I find unusual. Could you check whether there are any markings on the inside of the band, particularly a small stamped series of letters or numbers? This would help me tell you more about its origin. I took the ring off for the first time in 3 years. I carried it to the window. I tilted it toward the morning light and looked at the inside of the band with the magnifying glass I kept in my desk drawer for reading fine print. There were marks, a series of tiny stamped characters, partially worn but legible if you looked long enough. A hallmark, a date, and a name. Not Eleanor's family name, a completely different name. My hands were steady when I photographed it. They were not steady when I put the phone down. The name stamped inside the band was Hartwell. Not a common word, not an ambiguous fragment, a name. M. Hartwell, 1941. 6 characters and a year, pressed into the inner curve of rose gold nearly a century ago by someone who wanted to mark their property precisely and permanently. A name I had never heard Paul mention. A name that did not appear anywhere in the family stories Eleanor had told over those long Sunday dinners. Not in the genealogy she kept framed in the hallway. 2 generations of family photographs captioned in her careful handwriting. Not in any conversation I had ever had in 4 years of marriage about where this ring had come from and who had worn it before me. I put the ring down on my desk very carefully, the way you put down something fragile. I sent a second message to the gemologist. The name inside the band is Hartwell, M. Hartwell, 1941. Does that mean anything to you? Then I sat in my office chair for a long time, watching the morning light on the wall, listening to the sound of Paul making coffee downstairs, the familiar domestic percussion of the drawer, the grinder, the particular note of water hitting the carafe, and I tried to arrange what I knew into a shape that made sense. The ring was not Eleanor's family's, or if it was, there was a branch of that family she had never mentioned, a name she had erased from the story she told. Or, and this was the thought I kept circling and refusing to land on, the ring had never belonged to her family at all. I went downstairs. Paul was at the counter with his coffee, reading something on his phone with the relaxed, unhurried posture of a man whose morning contained no particular difficulty. He looked up when I came in and smiled, that familiar, reflexive smile, the one I had cataloged over 4 years as evidence of a straightforward and uncomplicated love. "Morning," he said. I sat down across from him. I put the ring on the table between us, face up. His eyes went to it. Something, very small, very controlled, happened in his face. "I've been looking at the hallmarks," I said. My voice came out level. I was almost surprised by it. "The name inside is Hartwell, M. Hartwell. Does that mean anything to you?" A pause. Not long, 2 seconds, perhaps 3. But in the context of a marriage, in the context of a question that should have produced an immediate, "No, why?" or "What are you talking about?" 2 seconds is an enormous amount of time. "Hartwell," he repeated. He picked up his coffee. "I've never heard that name. Probably a jeweler, like a maker's mark." The gemologist I've been speaking with says it's a personal inscription, not a maker's mark. The format is different from a manufacturer's stamp. This is a name and a date, a person. He looked at me then, directly, steadily, and said, "Where is this coming from, Monica? It's an old ring. It's 100 years old. Why does it matter whose name is inside it?" "Because your mother told me it belonged to her grandmother," I said, "and the name inside it doesn't match your family name." He said nothing. He drank his coffee. "Paul," I said, "is there something you know about this ring that I don't?" He set his mug down. He said, "I think you're reading too much into a hallmark," and he picked up his phone again, and that was, apparently, that. I went back upstairs. I was at my desk when the gemologist replied. "Hartwell is an interesting lead. I did a quick search in our estate jewelry records and found a listing from 2019, an Art Deco rose gold diamond ring, round cut, approximately 0.9 carat, sold at auction from the estate of one Margaret Hartwell of Cincinnati, Ohio. The ring was sold to a private buyer. I can't tell you who the buyer was, obviously, but the description matches what you've described and photographed very closely. If this is the same piece, it would mean the ring was purchased at auction, not inherited. Does that help?" My hands were not steady when I typed back, "Yes, it helps." I sat very still for a moment. Outside, a bird was doing something rhythmic and insistent in the oak tree at the edge of our property. I could hear Paul's footsteps downstairs, the familiar pattern of him moving from the kitchen to the living room, the small sound of the television turning on. I thought about Eleanor's face when she slid this ring onto my finger, the ceremony of it, the velvet box, the raised glasses, as a symbol that you are truly part of this family. I thought about the way it had fit perfectly the first time, as though it had been sized. It had been sized, because it was purchased, not passed down. It was an antique diamond ring, bought at auction in 2019, 6 years after Paul and I had started dating, sized to my finger at some point before it was presented to me, which meant it had been planned, which meant Eleanor had known my ring size. Which meant she had, at some point, obtained my ring size without my knowledge. Which meant she had been planning this specific gesture for long enough to have had the ring resized. I needed to understand why. I opened a new browser tab and searched antique jewelry, gift manipulation, family control. It was a crude search, and it produced useless results. I searched instead, why would someone give a valuable gift to a daughter-in-law? Also useless. I closed the laptop. I needed to think differently. I needed to stop searching the internet and start searching my own memory. Why would Eleanor give me a ring? Not a nice ring, an antique ring, a 100-year-old diamond ring, presented with elaborate ceremony as a family heirloom. What did that gesture accomplish? It accomplished belonging. It accomplished debt, not financial debt, but emotional, relational debt, the kind that accrues when someone performs an act of extraordinary generosity, the kind that can be called in. After everything I've done for you, after I welcomed you into this family, after I gave you my grandmother's ring. Except it wasn't her grandmother's ring. So what happened when that fiction collapsed? What was the ring actually worth? I Googled the auction record. I found the 2019 estate sale catalog archived on the auction house's website. The ring, listed as Art Deco rose gold diamond ring, circa 1940, round brilliant cut diamond approximately 0.9 carat, provenance, estate of Margaret A. Hartwell, Cincinnati, Ohio, had sold for $11,400. $11,000. Eleanor had spent $11,000 on a ring for me, a ring she had passed off as a family heirloom. I sat with that for a long time. I did not understand it. People do not spend $11,000 on a gesture of welcome. They spend that on an investment, on a claim. I called my friend Dana. Dana was a paralegal, pragmatic and unsentimental, the kind of person who looks at situations without the distortion of emotion and tells you what she actually sees. I told her everything: the parking lot, the old woman, the gemologist, the auction record. She was quiet for a moment after I finished. "Okay," she said. "I want you to think about whether Eleanor has ever brought up finances, specifically yours." I thought. "She asks about my salary sometimes, in a vague way. You must be doing so well, that kind of thing." "Has she ever asked about your assets, property, savings?" I thought again. And then I remembered something I had filed, long ago, under "She's just curious, it's a generational thing." A conversation from 8 months ago at one of those Sunday dinners, when Eleanor had asked, with that gracious, slightly too careful tone, whether Paul and I had thought about updating our wills. "It's just sensible, dear. You're not young anymore. If something happened to one of you, you'd want everything to go to the family." Paul had said they'd think about it. I had said something noncommittal. Eleanor had smiled and changed the subject. "Dana," I said, "she asked about our wills." A beat. "Has Paul changed his will recently?" "I don't know." "Find out," Dana said. "And Monica, look for paperwork. Anything in his filing cabinet, his desk, his email if you can access it. I'm not telling you to snoop. I'm telling you to look at what's already in your own house." I went to Paul's desk. He kept his important documents in a locked drawer, but the lock was a cheap one, the kind on a filing cabinet that can be opened with a straightened paperclip, a fact I had used before to retrieve our tax documents when he was traveling and I needed a copy. I used it now. The drawer opened. I lifted out the manila folder at the front, which was labeled in Paul's precise handwriting, Insurance/Estate. There was a will. His will, updated 8 months ago, around the same time as the dinner conversation. I had not been told about an update. I opened it and read it quickly, standing at his desk, the folder spread across the surface. It was mostly standard: the house to me, assets divided, that sort of thing. But there was an addendum, paper-clipped to the back, dated 3 months ago. The addendum directed that any jewelry or personal effects of recognized historical or family provenance transferred to Monica Hartwell. I stopped. Monica Hartwell. My name. My name and that other name, Hartwell, the name inside the ring. I read it 3 more times. The addendum stated that any jewelry or personal effects of recognized family provenance transferred to me, including, specifically, the Art Deco ring gifted December 2022, should, in the event of Paul's death or the dissolution of the marriage, be returned to Eleanor Marsh, as the item remains family property held in trust. He had written that ring into a legal document. He had written in her name. He had written it 3 months ago, without telling me, and the language, recognized family provenance, held in trust, was the language of someone who had decided in advance how to reclaim an object that had been given not as a gift, but as a lien. I put the addendum down. I stood at his desk, and I felt the room doing that thing rooms do in moments of genuine shock. The strange quality of light, the way ordinary objects become briefly incomprehensible, the way the world seems to briefly forget its responsibility to remain solid. I had been given the ring so that it could be taken back. I had been given it as a demonstration of ownership, not of the ring, but of me. You are truly part of this family, part of the family, subject to its rules, its claims, its definitions of what belonged to whom. The ring was bait. The ring was a hook, dressed in rose gold and antique filigree, and a story about grandmothers, designed to create a documented basis for Eleanor to reclaim an $11,000 piece of jewelry at a moment of her choosing: the dissolution of the marriage, Paul's death, any number of future contingencies, while establishing, in the meantime, a relationship of debt and belonging that would make me easier to manage. I had been managed. For 3 years, I had worn their management on my right hand and called it love. I put everything back exactly as I had found it. I closed the drawer. I walked to the bathroom and ran cold water over my wrists and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. And I thought very clearly and very quietly, no, this ends today. I called Dana back. I found it, I said. I found the addendum. She was silent for a moment. Okay, here's what we're going to do. Her voice had shifted into the register she used when she was being professional, crisp, ordered, precise. First, photograph everything. The addendum, the will, the auction record, the gemologist's messages, all of it. Second, do not confront Paul or Eleanor yet, not until you have spoken to an actual attorney. Third, wear the ring normally today. Do not change anything they can observe. Do you understand? Yes, I said. You have a case, Monica. What they've done may not be criminal, but it is deeply actionable. And the fact that she spent $11,000 on that ring, rather than simply giving you a cheap trinket, tells me she was planning something specific and long-term. We need to understand what before you show your hand. I wore the ring at dinner that night. I complimented Paul's cooking. I asked about his day. He told me about a shipping delay and a difficult client and a meeting that had run long, and I listened and nodded and refilled his wine, and the whole time the ring sat on my right hand like a small, cold secret. And I thought about the old woman in the parking lot, her dark eyes, her layered clothes, the absolute lack of drama in her voice when she said the ring you are wearing does not belong to you. She had been right. It didn't belong to me. It had never been meant to. What Eleanor had not calculated was that it no longer needed to. 3 days later, I sat in the office of an attorney named Patricia Cho, a woman Dana knew, small and precise, and possessed of an expression that suggested she had heard every variation of human duplicity at least twice. I laid out every document, every screenshot, every message from the gemologist. Patricia read through it all without comment and then looked up. The addendum is legally problematic, she said. It attempts to create an ongoing property claim on an item that was gifted, and under the law of this state, once a gift is made, it transfers ownership. The fiction of family provenance is unsupported. They can't reclaim it. She paused. What concerns me more is the broader pattern. The ring, the will update, the timing. This suggests a sustained attempt to position Eleanor as having a legitimate claim on assets within your marriage. Has she done anything else? I thought about the will conversation at the dinner table. I thought about her habit of touching things in our house. I thought about Paul's 2-second pause over his coffee cup that morning. And I thought about something I had almost forgotten, a conversation from 6 months ago when Paul had mentioned, casually, that his mother had been asking about our savings account, whether we had considered opening a joint family account for emergencies. I had said it seemed unnecessary. He had agreed and dropped it. Yes, I said. There's more. Patricia nodded, unsurprised. There usually is. She folded her hands on the desk. Here's what I recommend. You don't confront anyone yet. You let me send a quiet, formal letter to Paul's attorney, if he has one, if not, to Paul directly, stating that you are aware of the addendum, that you contest its validity, and that any further attempts to establish a claim on jointly held or personally held assets will be met with legal action. Sometimes that's enough. People doing this kind of thing rely on the other party not knowing what they know. The letter went out on the Thursday. Paul's response came on Saturday. He was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, and he was pale, not dramatically, but the particular gray-white of someone who has had a bad night and is trying to carry it quietly. He asked me to sit down. I sat. He said, "I should have told you about the addendum." He said it as an opening sentence with no preamble, which told me he had rehearsed it. My mother asked me to add it. She was worried about... She wanted to make sure the ring stayed in the family if things ever... He stopped. He started again. "I should have told you." "Yes," I said, "you should have." She didn't mean anything harmful by it. She was just... Paul. I waited until he met my eyes. She spent $11,000 on a ring from an auction house in 2019, sized it to my finger, presented it as a 100-year-old family heirloom, and then had you add a legal clause to your will to ensure she could take it back whenever she chose. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a plan. I paused. And the fact that you helped her execute it without telling me is a problem I don't yet know how to measure. The silence that followed was the longest and most honest we had produced in 4 years of marriage. He did not cry. He did not argue. He sat at our kitchen table with his hands flat on the surface, and he said, after a very long time, "I know." I had Patricia send a second letter, cawed to Eleanor directly, stating that the ring would remain with me, that any further attempts to establish claims on our property, joint or separate, would be escalated, and that I was maintaining records of all relevant communications. Eleanor called Paul 3 times that afternoon. He did not pick up. That, I noted, was perhaps the most accurate measure of where things stood. The weeks that followed were difficult. We went to couples counseling, which is not the same as fixing something, but is a start. Paul answered questions that should have been answered years earlier. Eleanor stopped attending Sunday dinners, first by invitation withdrawn, then by her own decision. I learned through Dana's research that Eleanor had done something similar once before, with Paul's first girlfriend, a situation involving a borrowed piece of jewelry and a subsequent demand for its return that had contributed to the end of that relationship. A pattern, then, a practiced one. I kept the ring, not because it has sentimental value now. It doesn't, not in the way it once did. I kept it because Patricia confirmed it was mine, legally and completely, and because there was something I wanted to understand clearly. The thing itself was beautiful. The rose gold filigree, the Art Deco precision of it, the stone that caught light and scattered it in cold, perfect fragments across any surface it touched. Margaret Hartwell had worn this ring. She had loved it, presumably, enough to have her name pressed into the inside of the band. It had belonged to a real woman with a real life before Eleanor purchased it and turned it into an instrument of something smaller and uglier. So I had it reclassified. I took it back to a jeweler and had a second inscription added on the other side of the band from Hartwell's name. ML 2023. My initials and the year I found out. 2 names on the inside of one ring, 80 years apart. 2 women who had not chosen to be connected, but were by the particular trajectory of that small circle of rose gold. 5 months later, on a cold November morning, I put on a different coat and drove to a different grocery store and walked through the parking lot with the deliberate, unhurried gait of someone who knows exactly where she is going and why. I did not fall. The ring was on my right hand. it caught the low winter sun and sent a small, bright point of light moving across the asphalt ahead of me, precise and definite as a compass needle. I thought about the old woman sometimes. I never saw her again. I do not know what she saw in that ring, or how she knew what she knew, or whether she was, in the precise technical sense, a fortune teller, or simply a woman who had been around long enough to recognize the particular quality of something that had been given with a condition hidden inside it, like a stone with a crack you can't see until it breaks. Whatever she was, she had been right. The ring did not belong to me. And then, at last, because of everything that followed, it finally did.